1 second. Okay, we're live.
Good morning. This is the May 17th, 2022 Neighborhood Development Committee meeting. And at this time, I'd like to ask the clerk to call the roll.
Alderman Bosley. Alderman Gunther.
Here.
Alderman Todd.
Here.
Alderwoman Clark Hubbard.
Here.
Alderwoman Evans.
Present.
Alderman Page. Chairwoman Howard.
Here.
5 present, you have quorum.
Thank you very much. I would like to take a minute to review the minutes of the Tuesday, January 11th meeting. Has everyone reviewed the minutes? I'd like to have a motion to approve the minutes from the January meeting. I'd like to have a motion from the January meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderman Bosley. Alderman Gunther.
Aye.
Alderman Todd.
Aye.
Alderwoman Clark Hubbard.
Aye.
Alderwoman Evans.
Aye.
Alderman Page. Chairwoman Howard.
Aye.
5 aye votes.
Okay. Having reviewed the minutes and moving on to the 4th item on our agenda, we have no board bills for review and we have no resolutions for review, but we are here today to discuss the St. Louis Vacancy Collaborative, and we'll review their what they've done so far and talk to us about the St. Louis Vacancy Collaborative. At this time, Madam Clerk, can we swear in the presenters? Or is that my responsibility?
I can do it either one. I've seen the chair do it before.
Okay.
So.
Go ahead and we'll swear them all in at one time.
Yes, if you all can unmute your microphones and raise your right hand, please. The testimony you're about to receive, tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth, or affirm, so help you God.
Okay. Having been duly sworn in, at this time, I'd also like to thank the Alderwoman from the 26th, Shamina Clark Hubbard, for bringing this to the committee and providing this opportunity for a little bit of education about what the collaborative does and what their plans are. So at this time, I will call our first speaker, Ms. Tori Park. Ms. Tori Park, would you tell us if you're a city resident and what ward you live in, and then just proceed with your presentation, okay?
Sure. Torrey Park, I live in the 15th ward on the 4200 block of Wyoming.
Okay. My old neighborhood.
Yeah. Oh, really?
Holy Family all the way.
Love it.
Okay.
Well, I wanted to make sure to, first of all, say thank you so much for having us. I am the director of the St. Louis Vacancy Collaborative. For those who might not know, we are a nonprofit organization whose mission is to reduce vacant property in St. Louis City as a coalition of community members. And this is really made up of private and nonprofit stakeholders and city agencies. I would like to thank the chair and the vice chair and members of the Neighborhood Development Committee for the opportunity to speak with you today about the work that the Vacancy Collaborative has been doing in the community for the past several years. And we will also present some recommendations that we feel are priorities for funding in the hope that it will catalyze the transformation of our city's landscape into a more vibrant, healthy, and safe space for all. If I have your permission, I would like to share my screen as part of the presentation, and then I will also happily introduce my cohort here today. Can everybody see the presentation on the screen? Okay, great. All right. So without further ado, I would like to move on to introducing Peter Hoffman. Peter, would you introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Chairpersons Howard and Clark Hubbard, thank you for allowing us the time today. Members of the Board of Aldermen, thank you for your opportunity to hear from us, giving us the opportunity to speak on these issues. My name is Peter Hoffman. I am a managing attorney of the Neighborhood Vacancy Initiative, a similarly named but not to be confused program at Legal Services of Eastern Missouri. We provide free legal assistance to city neighborhoods to help address vacant and abandoned nuisance properties. My entire legal practice has been focused on vacant and abandoned property, first for almost a decade in Kansas City, and then here in St. Louis, my hometown, since 2018, when I volunteered to become a member of the St. Louis Vacancy Collaborative. Thank you.
And good morning, everyone. My name is Laura Ginn. I'm the city's vacancy strategist, and I'm housed at St. Louis Development Corporation, which, as you know, is also over LRA, the land bank. And my work involves trying to coordinate the resources that we have in SLDC and the city to tackle vacant and abandoned properties. I've been working on this issue since 2016 and oversee some demolitions, but also the conversion of concentrations of vacant land to new community green spaces through an effort called Green City Coalition, which we won't dig into today, but just to give a little background there. And I also chair the Collaborative Stabilization, Maintenance, and Demolition Working Group and serve on the Vacancy Advisory Committee, which tries to help lead this work. Back to Tori.
Thanks, Peter and Laura. So I wanted to just give you a brief overview of, what that looks like, what we've been trying to accomplish and why it's important. To understand the impact of vacancy in the city of St. Louis today, it's really important to consider not only the large scale of empty building and lots, but there is also a human cost. As you can see, it was recently reported that St. Louis City has the third highest vacancy rate in the country. We are particularly focused on the fact that this disproportionately affects communities of color. The highest concentrated areas of vacancy are to the north and also to the southeast, as you can see on the map here. And this is sort of a snapshot that has come from our Vacant Property Explorer, which we released last year, that is very helpful to visualize the data of what we're dealing with here. Another fact that we feel is very important is the sheer number of vacant parcels that we're dealing with. We've got over 10,000 buildings that usually sit vacant, and on average about 14,000 lots. And basically those numbers have been staying around the same for a number of years, because as we try to reduce in one area, more continue to come online. And one other thing to note that we particularly feel is important is that vacant buildings are huge safety risks. Beyond the environmental impacts, we also know that they are a huge risk to our first responders. And this is evidenced from the tragic and possibly preventable death earlier this year of firefighter Ben Polson. So what it comes down to is that this is about neighborhoods, community, and the city coming together to do equitable development work and address these challenges. So in a nutshell, who we are is that the Vacancy Collaborative helps to coordinate existing vacancy efforts under one umbrella. And we encourage the public and private sectors to work together towards solutions in a comprehensive and coordinated way. I do want to make note that the people who are here presenting today are representative of just a few partnerships with the collaborative. We are a diverse group of stakeholders who are representing more than 40 different organizations and groups. This includes entities such as SLACO. We have multiple place-based organizations such as neighborhood associations and CDCs. We have members who are representative of more than 12 different city departments. Primarily, those would include those in the building division, PDA, forestry, but really it's open to all. And then we have hundreds of volunteers that participate in each of our 5 working groups that meet on a monthly basis to work on projects that they've determined through research and community engagement, our priorities, and follow the map of a 18-month work plan that we are now currently in the middle of. So each member brings a variety of perspectives, but we all come together to work on these issues as a team, and this effort is truly people-powered. So through the collaborative and through these working groups that are by and large sort of a grassroots effort, lots of volunteers, we came to the following recommendations. Again, these align with the work plan that we've identified for the next 18 months. We also based a lot of our findings externally on other reports that have come out in recent years, including those from the Center for Community Progress and the Asakura Robinson report. So in essence, this is an opportune time for us to rise to the challenge of addressing vacancy. Our city does have a robust set of tools to reduce vacant and abandoned property, but to be effective, the tools require a coordinated effort from public and private sectors. To date, the city has struggled to adequately fund and prioritize the staffing and other resources needed to use these tools at a scale that meets our city's needs. I'd like to move into drilling down into what those needs are and how they might possibly be funded. We came up with several recommendations for our city to invest these funds in the following pages for at least the next 5 years, with the goal of reducing vacancy by up to half. And I would love to turn this over to Laura again to start us off.
All right. Oh, Carol, were you?
I hate to interrupt, but I just
Please
need
do.
to inform Ms. Park. Can you please turn a copy of this presentation over to our clerk or send it to me?
Absolutely.
So that it's in our records. Okay,
Yes,
he
ma'am.
just messaged me. So I just wanted, before I got away from me, I wanted to get it out there. Okay, thank you. I'm
Happy.
sorry. Okay, move forward.
No worries, thanks. Okay, so we're gonna walk you through some big numbers and probably a lot of lingo and jargon, but you know, as Tori mentioned, we're trying to put forward these funding recommendations for a once in a generation opportunity to really make an impact on this issue that we've kind of been treading water on perhaps for decades. So we've categorized these into some sections here, and I'm going to talk about funding for building division, forestry, and LRA related to property interventions and maintenance. So our first recommendation here is the need for dedicated vacant building inspectors. Little background on this. So building inspectors are distributed throughout the city at about 2 per ward, but that workload is disproportionately higher for inspectors in high vacancy areas. And this is because inspections for both, or for all vacant buildings, for demolitions of vacant buildings, rehabs, and occupied properties are all taken care of by the same inspector. So in areas with high concentrations of vacant buildings, especially that means we also have more demolitions, and each demolition is 4 inspections on top of trying to track vacant buildings and occupied homes. That's a workload that, especially when we have currently short 14 inspectors, vacant properties get punted down lower in the list of priorities when we have staff shortages and a lack of ability to spread those inspectors across the city. So what we were proposing is that there are dedicated inspectors that only focus on vacant properties and the treatments to vacant properties. So they would oversee demolitions and the many inspections along that process, vacant building assessments, putting together scopes of work for stabilization, and that team of inspectors will be dedicated specifically to this issue. We have one example of that today. We have one inspector that works for the Prop NS program that goes out, assesses structures, puts together scope of work, and we need to multiply Banjo by many to really make an impact on this issue. So that's our first recommendation. And the second is stabilization for privately owned buildings. So I'm sure you're all aware now that thanks to a voter approved bond issue, LRA has funding to stabilize some of our buildings. We'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute, but until recently, there were no funds available to stabilize, to touch privately owned buildings in any way other than demolition. So we need to have a pot of funds that we can use to save those structures, to prevent them from demolition by decay, and to really intervene, particularly in historic areas, and keep those privately owned vacant buildings on the rolls. So fortunately, a couple weeks ago, the Board of ENA did a preliminary approval of $5 million for the Building Preservation Fund, so close to that $7 million that we proposed. So just hoping that that funding increases a bit and continues year over year, keeping in mind that privately owned vacant buildings are 2/3 of the building stock of vacant buildings in this city. So we can only address 1/3 by only talking about LRA. We've got to start working on privately owned buildings as well. So to that note, the next line for doubling the amount of buildings in the Prop NS program. So Prop NS, Proposition Neighborhood Stabilization, again allows up to $30,000 for a single family home and up to $50,000 for a multifamily home that is owned by LRA. That allows us to stabilize only, watertight, keep it from deteriorating more, get it one step further to rehab for the person who's going to buy it and bring it back into reuse. Those maxes, now that we're about 1.5 years into that program, are insufficient to meet the needs of these buildings. The average LRA building has been in our inventory for more than 7 years, and $30,000 and $50,000 isn't getting us where we need to be. So we're recommending that we bring another source of funds, not restricted to the bond funds and the legislation of the original Prop NS, but that can be layered on top so that we can bring those dollars further along and push those LRA buildings closer to full reuse, and have more properties that are eligible for that program. So the next two, moving beyond stabilization and back into kind of the demolition part. Please don't bark. Sorry. So as a little note here, over the past 5 years, we have something good we can say. Through demolition of buildings and through sales, we've actually reduced the number of buildings in the LRA inventory by 50% over the last 5 years. Now, if we also look at the demolitions completed in the last 5 years, 1,700 were LRA buildings and only about 400 were privately owned. If we go back to what I just said, 2/3 of vacant buildings are privately owned structures. Moving forward, we are going to have to treat more and more of those privately owned buildings, and we need increased demo money to do that. There's also been some work happening in the last few years to move us toward enhanced demolition practices, where we can really work to divert our building materials from the landfill and put them into active reuse. We want to reuse historic building materials in new and infill construction in our rehabs, and we don't have a system for that yet. So part of this line item really allows us to invest in deconstruction and building material reuse, which is something many residents have been asking for. The next line, increased funding for vacant property maintenance. So currently with our spending for maintaining vacant properties, and let's just think about grass cutting for a second, we on average mow vacant properties about 4 times a year. This $12 million ticket item gets us a little closer to meeting our city codes of not allowing weeds to grow above 6 inches. So when we think about extrapolating what we spend now at 4 mows per year and trying to get us closer to 1 mow every 2 weeks, moves us up to about $12 million a year that needs to be invested in maintaining these, up to 20,000-ish vacant properties that have to be mowed and maintained on an almost weekly basis. And then finally, to wrap all of this up, speaking really from the heart here, anytime we increase funding for programs like this, we have got to invest in the project management staff to manage these subcontracts, put together a scope of work, oversee that work, and the data and technology that allows us to make wise decisions for that work. So I will stop there and head over to Peter.
Thanks, Laura. I'm going to talk a little bit about the LRA and then some of these strategies to address these privately owned vacant properties in the next slide. But the LRA, as I'm sure many of you know, is the oldest land bank in the country. Unfortunately, that means it lacks a lot of the funding mechanisms that other more modern land banks have. A 2017 assessment of the LRA concluded that staffing needs to be at least tripled for the LRA, and those positions needed to increase effectiveness include Director of Strategy, Marketing and Communications Director, Community Engagement Coordinator, Greening Coordinator, and that funds also be allocated for legal assistance to quiet the title for LRA properties, increasing its marketability. Another closely related strategy is—
Excuse me, I hate to interrupt, but I don't know if we have the right slide up here. Do you have a slide? Is there a slide that
Yeah,
accompanies
can
your—
we go? There we are. That's where we're supposed to be.
Thank you, I'm sorry.
No, that's all right. Thank you for bringing that to my attention. The next recommendation is to actually activate some of the dormant tools. We've talked a lot about what works within city departments and how that funding needs to be increased, but there are other tools that have laid dormant and haven't yet been utilized. One of those includes the Residential Renovation Loan Commission. This is actually a board authorized under the city's tax foreclosure law that will allow the city to siphon off tax delinquent properties from public auction for redevelopment purposes. This existing vehicle could be activated by appointing a board and adding a dedicated staff person to help the city strategically acquire tax foreclosed properties for redevelopment. And of course, the Planning and Design Agency, PDA, plays an essential role in coordinating between city agencies, neighborhood planning, and public engagement. PDA can facilitate the city's collaboration with neighborhoods to set demolition and deconstruction priorities that ensure the city's vacancy interventions reflect the input and vision of existing residents, public feedback, and available data. In addition, PDA should support and facilitate neighborhood organizing efforts that are foundational to building stronger neighborhoods equipped to take collective action on neighborhood issues such as vacancy and abandonment. Next slide, please. The nature of vacant and abandoned properties often necessitates some type of legal intervention. This need not be adversarial. It could include diversion programs from municipal court to connect low-income homeowners with needed resources, but often legal interventions are necessary vacant and abandoned property regularly have complex title issues that need to be resolved through court interventions. The city's law department problem property unit could be bolstered to support the building division through municipal and circuit court interventions. Fines and fees against non-compliant and absentee owners can be sent for collection as delinquent taxes on an annual basis, and their foreclosure expedited through a reinstituted annual special tax sale. This is a tax foreclosure sale specifically for nuisance properties with code violations. Problem properties involvement is critical to reviving the special tax sale and enforcing the building code through court intervention when the administrative citation approach is ineffective. Until these strategies are fully funded and are working effectively, we must remember that neighborhoods and private actors also have several rights of action to help compel the owners of vacant and abandoned properties to act. For vacant properties where owners block tax foreclosure through a payment for a minimum payment of fines, fees, taxes, these other legal remedies must be deployed. The state law allows for certain cities, currently not the city of St. Louis, but the city of Kansas City uses this to create a forced sale receivership process, which can sometimes compel absentee property owners to respond and rehabilitate their code violating buildings. Until that statute has been updated, until then, funding private neighborhood initiated legal interventions under Missouri's Abandoned Housing Act, receivership, and nuisance laws can supplement existing municipal code enforcement actions. With that, I'm going to turn it back over to Tori to take us through the end of the presentation.
Thanks, Peter. So this kind of ties back into coordination between nonprofit entities and the city. So not only are we thinking about different departments and legal interventions, but this effort requires that we don't operate in silos. We need interdepartment collaboration, which is why we are asking specific coordination with the mayor's office by hiring an executive vacancy manager to coordinate, which in turn, that person can help convene different departments to set strategies and goals aligned with what we are trying to accomplish. Secondarily, as Laura mentioned before, data is key for driving our decision-making process, and we believe tools like the Vacant Property Explorer, which has been used by multiple departments, should be made more accessible to the public. And currently, since the Vacant Property Explorer was developed by volunteers and is currently managed by one, we feel that it would be a much more sustainable action to fund that as a full-time position. And then finally, outreach and engagement we know are key for reaching out to residents, educating folks on the importance of reducing vacancy, and providing key resources and tools to address it on the ground level. So here's the big price tag at the end. This is what this adds up to. We've got two figures here. One is for essentially the first year of funding, but understanding that these funds need to be sustained over time. It's not a one-time injection of cash flow. This is a problem that has gone unaddressed for years, and it's going to take funding and many years of coordinated effort to undo it. But with this price tag comes a lot of opportunity. So it really does come down to our ability to grow and strengthen our neighborhoods, ensure people's health, well-being, and to also make sure that people are not displaced out of their homes, leading to further vacancy. Other ideas that have come out of the collaborative that can be addressed through these means include reducing crime and improving environmental conditions, specifically by working on greening vacant lots, getting more people out on the streets, obviously stabilizing or demolishing structures to minimize risk for families and first responders. We are also currently working on addressing the code enforcement system, and then overall spending money to invest in our city. We will eventually reduce the cost burden to the city. So it's time for us to stop talking. We threw a lot at you here, and would just love to see what the members of the committee have questions.
First, let me thank you for your presentation. It was very succinct, very pointed. And then if we could, I think we need to unshare the screen so we can see who's here and who's raising their hand. Thank you so much. I will go through the list and I will reserve my questions for last. And at this time, we'll start with committee members in order of seniority. Well, I'll let the chair, co-chair, the vice chair, ask her questions first. Alderwoman Clark Hubbard, questions? You brought this to us, so I'm thinking you might be the expert on it. So if you have any questions, please.
I'm definitely not the expert. We are blessed to have some amazing people that are experts in this. I'm just thankful to be in position to be able to support them in their work. I've actually rolled my ward with Laura again. I've been in so many meetings with Peter, and I've admired Tori's work and all the other agencies, that are involved in this collaborative. And for me, St. Louis is so known for these silos. And so when I see work like this getting done, it inspires me, it encourages me to try to make sure that we support it however we can, because again, I've rode with them and I've seen it. I want to ditto if we could just put banjo in a copy machine and copy off some more banjos, right? The city would be so much further in the work that he does. So I just did want to give those kudos and shout out to Banjo. But there's clearly an issue with vacancy in our wards, some clearly more than others, and that's why we might be a little more engaged, but I know that we as a city all care. So thank you all for taking the time out to come. I hope that we can do everything we can to support this work. I know there were some things that were announced that might be coming down the pipeline, which would be good, but there's always more of a need, and I understand that. So again, while the time is right, and I heard that said a couple of times now, the time is right now for so many reasons. I think we should go ahead and help get this done the right way. So again, thank you all for coming out, and I look forward to the rest of the questions.
Okay. Alderman Bosley, are you on the call? Alderman Bosley, do you have any questions?
I do. Could you come right back to me though, please?
Sure. I will be right back. Okay. Alderman Gunther. Questions?
Thank you, Chairwoman. And thank you, Alderwoman Clark Hubbard, for bringing this discussion. Good to see you, Tori and Peter and Laura. Great work as always. I know Peter, we've done some wonderful projects in the 9th Ward and the surrounding neighborhoods on some vacancy issues, and I hope that we can expand on some of the projects. As you know, the map showed, there is quite a bit of vacancy in the southeast part of the city, as well as North City. So I think that, a lot of times people think that this is just a North City issue, but the map shows you that it's definitely not. So I thank you for highlighting that. I guess I did have one question about the Prop NS funds right now, because that was we voted on the tax for that. How much money are we bringing in yearly from Prop NS? Does anyone know that?
You say bringing in?
Yeah.
or spending.
How much are we receiving?
So the total cap for the program is a $40 million bond with a max of $6 million per year. We haven't hit that. I think maybe 3 million, 2.5 million in this first year of ramping up. So the issue isn't the total money at large for Prop NS, it's the max per property. That's a hindrance.
Gotcha. Okay, and so then what the proposed, your, I guess, second to last slide, the big numbers slide. So would that be combined with, say, if we had a 6 million a year from NS, and then we need an additional revenue source to fund the big number you had, what was it, 40 million? So would that just be looking at a ARPA funds or RAM settlement funds, or is there a desire to put another sort of NS2 on the ballot?
Sorry, if anyone else, feel free to jump in. I think NS2, no, because the exciting thing about ARPA funds is they are applicable to treating these vacant and abandoned properties and these decades of disinvestment. So the opportunity to have a less restricted funding that can sit on top of that would allow us to push that program further. So there are properties that, we've had to deny and scoot down to demolition just because the cost to repair them was so beyond the limits of that program. So it would allow us to save more buildings and also potentially to push them further to rehab. So NS is also restricted to building stabilization, but can we not invest more and get those properties even closer to rehab and really cut across that appraisal gap that rehabbers are using when we try to reinvest in these properties?
And I just want to tack onto that and say that this is a leverage investment. I mean, investing in vacant and abandoned properties is going to return them to productive use. It's going to lead to private investment. It's going to get these properties back on the tax rolls, creating the revenue that the city needs. So.
Okay, thank you. Those were my questions. No further, and thank you very much for all your work.
I'll just add one more clarification, Dan, because you mentioned, is it NFL or ARPA or other? And our thought in putting together these recommendations was, we need about 200 million infused in this issue in a short period of time to really get at this, right? The question of where all that money comes from is a little beyond the recommendations, but knowing that, perhaps if ARPA can't meet it all the way, that NFL proceeds can come in and maybe private sector needs to do some match, but collectively we as a region need to hit that number.
Excellent, thank you.
Okay. Alderman Todd, do you have any questions?
No, thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. Alderwoman Evans, do you have any questions?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
I know with the Prop NS program that LRA offered like 35,000 to stabilize a single family and 50,000 for a multiple family. Now that you're going to, if I'm right in my understanding, also use funds for privately owned buildings, vacant buildings, and the monies for that, is it the same? I guess you could say ratio that you're using for the single and multi for privately owned?
We
Or
did
is
kind
it
of
different?
we based the math on the average spending from the NS program so far. They're averaging $35,000 investment per building to get to that big number. But yeah, it would be a separate pot of funds, and we aren't recommending that they have the restrictions that NS do. With these privately owned buildings, what we're talking about is, if the roof is starting to cave in, can we go in and repair that roof so that water damage doesn't start coming in and destroying the structure further? Now that would get billed to that property owner through that course of action, different than LRA, obviously. But similar thinking in that, you know, we could do tuck pointing, we could replace roofs, we could keep deterioration from expounding, but not necessarily, you know, we're not going to try to make it livable, right? But keep it from becoming worse. I don't know if that answered.
Okay, so, and you're saying that you would go in and do the work, but then bill the owner. Is that what you're saying?
Correct. And that's not unprecedented. So the building division is a, you know, Department of Public Safety, has the authority to rectify these code violations. What we have, and the only source of funds we've had so far to do that is demolition. So when there's a privately owned structure that's deteriorating, in the past, the only pot of funds we've had has to been to go in and demolish. But we also, you know, have the authority to do other things. So if we had a less restricted pot of funds that wasn't just demolition, we could actually do repairs to those buildings instead. But that code process is that anything we do to a privately owned structure gets billed to that property owner. If they don't pay it, then it could move into things like a tax sale or a foreclosure, the same as any other fees or fines that go against privately owned properties today.
Okay, and the reason I'm inquiring is because I have a building on where I live. The front looks fine. You go through the alley and it looks like a baby doll house. Part of the, you know, is missing. The back is missing. So where would this piece of property fit into the program? Would it be demolished or funds thrown at it to try to revive it?
I would hope it would get a full assessment and put together a scope of work. And if it's, you know, savable within a reasonable range of funds, then you rebuild that back wall, right? But if the back wall has caused water to sit in the basement for 10 years and now you have foundation issues and other things. So it really depends. And that's part of the challenge, is getting enough inspectors, enough project managers, enough data to make those decisions, and the money to come and step in once those decisions are made. And that's where we're missing a lot of points along that process currently, from staff to program funding, right? We're trying to fill all that in, get that big picture.
Okay, one more question and then I'm leaving.
You're fine.
Say, for instance, you've got a constituent who has a building. It's intact, but it needs a roof of some sort. Will there be funds available for that?
That is the idea.
Okay.
Yeah,
Alrighty
we
then.
didn't include that in this presentation, but on some follow-up materials, we do recommend that the city continue to fund adequately
Healthy
home repair programs. That's an essential element of preventing vacancy and abandonment, is keeping people in their homes if we can, and keeping those homes safe and livable, and also making sure that people are able to pass those properties down with clean title through the generation. So we know the city has dedicated some funding already to home repair, and I think we're very supportive of that, and just want to say that needs to be continued as well as a strategy.
Thank you.
Okay, is that all? Alderwoman Evans?
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much. All right, we're gonna go back to, oh, no.
To me.
No, no. Are you finished?
Yes, I thought I saw Shameen's hand going up.
Oh, okay. All right. Alderwoman Clark Hubbard, yes.
I did, just real quickly while we on that point, I want to say how much I always try to advocate for the healthy home repair program as well. But publicly, I would like to say that it does need to be strengthened. There's some barriers that need to be taken away. And also some of the homes that are on this out west, those repair, the funds that are available won't cover some of the stuff that they're doing. And then on the back end, I'm now receiving complaints about some of the contractors and the work that's been done. So when we talk about making sure that we build capacity in that healthy home repair, we look at all of those.
Look at the and vet the providers that are, yeah, I've had some complaints and then about the processes but that's another conversation.
Since you brought that up, Shameen, I wanted to ask, what if you know you have a reliable contractor that is not on the list of the city? What do you do for that? I mean, is there a means of accessing that contractor that you know does decent and excellent work as opposed to the ones that they have on the list for the city? Is there a way of, what do you do when you come to that situation?
I would send them actually, well, to the building division or the Prop NS team. So there are certified contractor lists. They can, once they get approved and into the system, they actually have an online presence. They can log in, they can view bids for building stabilization or other project and do it online. It's just getting certified and put in that process. So definitely refer them over to building division about getting on the list for bids.
And such, yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Alderman Page, are you on the call? I don't know. Did he respond to the roll call, Madam Clerk?
No, he did not. However, he did give me a call and said he was unable to get on. So
That's
I
fine.
just sent a chat to STL TV asking them to resend his link.
Okay, all right, then we'll go to Alderman Bosley at this time.
All right, appreciate it. I appreciate you all being here also. As a quick question, number one, well, not a question, one quick comment and then a question. Laura Jen, I know that you work very, very hard to make sure that properties are torn down and certain properties that can be saved are saved. So I definitely appreciate you working in the capacity that you work in. One of the things that I do know has been pretty interesting since this process, and it's not on Laura or anybody in LRA, the funds, I believe, have not been spent in the, how would I say, the most affected parts of town. I have the second, I believe, most amount of derelict buildings here in the entire city of St. Louis, and Alderwoman Evans, I believe, has the first. I don't remember exactly how many buildings Prop NS has started on within our ward, but I know it was about 2 or 3, and they were on Agnes, very, very small buildings. There's a lot of money out there, and I just want to know an exact amount of properties that have been renovated in the 3rd ward in particular since we've started the Prop NS process.
I don't have the number off the top of my head, sorry, but you know I can get it to you. But yeah, it is low. I will say one note on that though is Prop NS is a public nomination process, and that was built into it, right? So properties are only considered if they are nominated by a resident, and then they go to an advisory committee for review. So it's not a program where we're, as LRA, out there seeking buildings to stabilize. We are only reviewing the nominations we receive. So to get that number up, you'd want to get nominations to increase. But I think you brought up a good point about feeling like funds aren't being efficiently spent on demolition and stabilization, and it doesn't, feel logical to a lot of people. Or we'll hear like, why'd you take down this building when around the corner there's a fire shell that's been sitting there for 2 years? Those kinds of complaints happen a lot. And that's what we're really trying to address with all of this. If we have sufficient staff and sufficient funds and sufficient technological support, we can make strategic decisions about how to spend these funds. But so far, even as funding has kind of increased in some of these categories over the last couple of years, we're not increasing in staff and technology to make good decisions about how to spend that money. So we're still responding to requests for demo, to citizen service calls and requests, right? And so, for example, in your ward, it's kind of this flash between request for demolition and request to not demo if it's historic. And those are kind of the only 2 points of data that are coming in to make those decisions. We've got to be able to step back and really view this issue at large and be able to deploy all of these resources, you know, across the categories. But when we've only had demo money and we don't have enough people to spend it well, then we're just responding to complaints as they come in.
Understood, and I completely understand that. And that's a lot of times my response to a lot of things that's happening in the community. People will say that folks are broke into this building. We need to do something about it now before they burn it down. And lo and behold, before we actually get it taken down, some folks will actually go inside and burn it down, not intentionally, but you know, things happen when you're out there just trying to stay warm. So, you know, with those things being said, I know I have a very high number of vacant buildings here in the ward. What I'd like to do at some point in time, and I know once again, Laura again she is very responsive. We just did a ride along with, through the ward just last week, well, not last week, 2 weeks ago, looking at the different trees and other things that are also plaguing neighbors that have grown over the years, that started off as weeds right next door to some of these buildings that we torn down before LRA started kind of requesting these companies to deal with the tree line area where you have all these weeds growing up after you tear down this building. So these weeds turn into big old trees. Trees end up growing up, going into the neighbor's yards, going into LRA lots. It causes a big problem for all of us. And I think that's one big issue that we also need to look at when it comes down to neighborhood stabilization and dealing with this vacancy problem. These vacant lots are also part of, I believe, the vacancy collaborative. Just because we're dealing with housing and we turn down housing, we also have to deal with what happens after we tear down these houses and the different problems that exist in the communities. Right now, we have lots that are, 3 and 4 feet high after we tore down a building. Could we tore down a building because it was an issue or emergency for public safety and health for us to get that down? Somebody could have gotten hurt with the bricks falling or the people going inside doing what it is that they do. But there also is an issue that we have to deal with after that. And this is not only where, again, I want to make sure that everyone knows I'm not tossing that issue in any way, shape, form, or fashion her way. She is one of the individuals that helped initiate the initial request, which is let's tear down this building because the neighbors are complaining about it, and being that reactive approach to helping us as alder people. When we say the residents saying it got to go, then it got to go. We've been in for 10 years trying to build it up. So we're now at the time where we do have funds to build things up. So I propose that, with the ARPA funds that we have, and I'll continue to say this on multiple occasions until we get to a point where we can have real conversations about it. I think that we don't need to contract out the multiple jobs that need to be done within the city on these multiple homes. I believe we need to have healthy home repair teams for each neighborhood. We need to hire our own electricians, our own plumbers, our own carpenters, our own floor layers, all these different individuals, opposed to paying $100,000 or $60,000, 30, 40, 50, whatever the job entails per company. We pay a person $60,000 per year that is an expert at what it is that they do. Pay them top of the line, whether it's 60 or 80. And that's what you do the entire year, is you go through these communities and you work out the physical side of what we know is labor intensive, and labor intensive jobs cost a lot of money. That's one of the problems that our people are dealing with. Folks can afford the materials, but the labor is very expensive. You have plenty of mothers and aunties and uncles and plenty of folks that can afford these materials. But the labor is very, very expensive. So with those things being said, we used to have healthy home repair teams. We used to have something called Christmas in April, where people would come and fix your house up. All of those programs have not been in effect for a very long time. And we all are out here kind of trying to contract jobs. And the rhetoric around the city is there's not enough trained individuals here. So, I think that's just something we can't continue to say. And we're going to also have on the flip side of that, we have the most job incubators, or we have the most startup companies in the Midwest or in the entire United States. You know, we're the startup companies, but we don't have educated individuals or skilled individuals to eventually take these jobs. I mean, that's you know, that we can't continue to say that. So I would say we have to look at some point in time, making sure that we put some type of a program together to educate individuals and hire skilled individuals who we can train to go out here and do these jobs that cost $30,000 per roof. And we can hire 2 or 3 people and give them $600,000 over a period of a few years to do the jobs on multiple roofs and multiple different houses within the city. And that comes down to the neighborhood stabilization piece also, when it, you know, or the vacancy program, Vacancy Collaborative. You know, we're contracting these jobs out. And yeah, people in the neighborhood that, you know, on a regular basis see these houses, live next door to them, and they think the only option is to tear it down because they're not in constant contact with the neighborhood collaborative. And maybe that's, you know, that's a problem for us as, and I would say me as an alderman within my neighborhood, is not having the resources to communicate with my residents the way that I would like to. We get 250 stamps per month to communicate with 11,000 residents. I mean, it's just not enough people for us. I'm sorry, it's not enough resources for us to be able to effectively communicate to our residents what it is going on in their communities. And sometimes the only option is to tear these buildings down. So, you know, I like to look at what it would take for us to create, once again, a healthy home repair program in each neighborhood with these funds that we have. We have a lot of vacant buildings. And if we have people looking at them every day and working on a strategic plan to deal with what's going on in these neighborhoods that they work in and they know they'll be coming to every day, not getting pulled from the JBL to Old North, and then from Old North all the way down to Baton, that's an issue or a problem. You know, people that have a steady business aren't getting pulled from left to right, you know, like that within our city. They have job sites and they have people that know they'll be on these job sites for some time. And we have all this money, we have all this vacant land that's, you know, here in abundance, and all these vacant buildings here in abundance within the city of St. Louis. And I think it'd be within our best interest to give these neighborhoods what it is that they need when they're looking at these vacant buildings, and give them the chance to say, hey, I don't want this torn down. We got the resources to build it up. Let's talk to, you know, the collaborative and see what it is we can do to save it, based on us having also our own home repair teams. You know, people don't only want to see the building next door to them built up. You know, why get a new roof on this vacant building if I can also get a new roof myself when I got water coming in and I'm, you know, going to sleep every night hearing these drips, hoping that it doesn't, you know, end up in a spark and I wake up with my lights out, or a circuit breaker trip. So
I think everybody agrees that we need to do something about what's going on with all of our buildings, and get this, you know, underway. Alderman Bosley, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
You're okay. My signal kind of gets bad sometimes. My only question was exactly how many buildings, and this isn't for Laura again. I'd like to know from the Vacancy Collaborative, if they are on the line, how many buildings that they have spent funding on here in the North Side, and exactly how much funding they spent. That should be something that we have an immediate answer for. And I don't want this, once again, this don't fall on the SLDC. There's an entire nonprofit set up for this.
Yeah, so I just got to point out real quick, because the language there might have been confusing. Vacancy Collaborative spends no money on properties, right? So
I'm sorry, right? Not them, but how much have we spent? How
but
much?
I will follow up.
I know that
it will be me. I'll follow up and answer that for you for the third ward.
I think you wanted the whole city, and then particularly the North Side. So is that correct?
Gotcha.
I did.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Are there more? Are you okay? Any other?
That was it.
Bosley? Okay,
Yes,
thank you. I see Alderwoman Evans has her hand up.
2 hands.
Okay.
Okay. Yes, I wanted to know, is there a record of properties nominated within award? Do you have the number of on hand as to the properties that are nominated in award?
Ms. Ginn, you're muted. now.
Yeah. So we've been talking about, we need a dashboard for this. The count is not available, but I just put in the chat a reminder. The Prop NS program has a pretty great website built into the city site. And at any time you can come click on view pilot and nominated properties. You can narrow that down by your ward if you like, or by a street, but it's going to show you every property that was ever submitted for consideration for Prop NS and where it's at. So for example, construction in progress, or construction complete and it's up for sale, or nominated and it's still under review. That is all available online at that link.
Okay, and that's under what? View pilot of the what?
So it says view pilot and nominated properties.
Okay. Nominated properties.
Any
Okay,
other
thank you.
Okay,
Mhm.
thank you. I will, is Alderman Page on the call? Has he been able to get on? Do we know?
Doesn't look like it.
Okay. All right, at this time, I have a couple of, you mentioned, okay, I'm sorry. Alderwoman Evans, you need to mute.
Sorry.
But that's okay. At this, I don't know who it was, I've lost track, but there was a max property when you do the, now I lost where it was, but there was something about the max that the property can be taxed for the rehab. I don't know, maybe, let me move on. Okay, you were talking about 200 million, an infusion of 200 million. Can you expand upon what that would do? And I don't know who that would be the person to ask. Would that be Ms. Park, Ms. Ginn, or Mr. Hoffman?
Well, I do want to interject to say that the 209 million that we came to for the total on the next to last slide is over a 5-year period, making the case that, it would average out to be about 41 million per year.
Now, that would include employees and demo?
Yes, it would include all the things that we listed out throughout
Okay.
the presentation in
Okay.
different categories for both, departmental agencies, judicial remedies, and coordination and outreach that would be through the Vacancy Collaborative as well.
Okay, and I'm going to speak for the committee, and if anybody has an objection, please let me know. I guess I want to know, what is the ask here? What can we do to help this collaboration to realize what's going on? There's some misconception that maybe, vacancy is an issue for only the north side. It is not. It's a citywide issue. We have an older housing stock that people, and then we don't, hand off the properties correctly so that we have clear titles. To get this and be all encompassing, what is the ask here of what we as the Board of Aldermen could do to help facilitate this organization to become a real working entity of city government, or of the SLDC? I guess that's what you are part of, and that's where you would work from. Is that correct, Ms. Ginn?
I'm gonna wait to see if Tori wanted to take that. Peter?
Yeah, I could jump in a little bit. So
Okay.
the collaborative is really just this informal coalition. There are some specific asks. Overwhelmingly, the Vacancy Collaborative is just volunteers. Sometimes those volunteers are elected officials, sometimes they're city staff, sometimes they work for nonprofits like myself and my colleagues here. folks in academia or with neighborhood associations. There are a few things in the proposal that I think the Vacancy Collaborative does really well. And if there is a request for private funding, it would be those types of things. So the Vacancy Explorer is now something that is used by most city departments, and certainly you all should have access to that to help us with real-time information about vacancy. That is a fundable sort of private investment. Also, some community engagement staffing would help make sure that we're still able to kind of be the glue that holds all of these volunteers together. But really the bulk of the ask and bulk of the recommendations are not for private investments. They are for public investments within the city's infrastructure. The city has a lot of tools that work really well. They're just not funded adequately. And what we've tried to do is go through the programs that are working to help reduce vacancy or can be used to better address vacancy in the city, and recommend that those investments be made within the city itself to increase staffing, to increase effectiveness, to increase proficiency. So overwhelmingly, these recommendations are recommendations for the city to invest in itself and its own departments in the ways that we've kind of outlined in our proposal.
Okay.
I would,
I guess my other question is, you cited the ARPA funds and the NFL funds. Those could be used, and I don't know if may have already be in the pipeline or maybe proposed or, in conversation to either shore up some of these vacant buildings, to demo some of them. But I guess my thing is the employees could be the issue, because that's something that has to be sustained over time. And, you can't just hire them and say, oh, well, we ran out of ARPA funds, so we don't have you anymore. And that would be counterproductive, I believe, in the long run. So
Right.
I
Both, I would just say both the program, the interventions to stabilize buildings are investments, as I mentioned to Alderman Gunther earlier, that are really a leveraged investment that will result in more money coming back into the city. And that's the kind of the unique thing about vacancy, is investing in these buildings will start to generate tax revenue. But both those property specific interventions are just as important, and maybe in some ways less important than having the people who can continue to work on these and go in between departments, respond to your requests or any aldermanic requests for assistance to help structure these programs, to help oversee these programs, to help manage these programs, so that they can really be effective at helping us bring the investment back into these vacant properties that will sustain us over the long term.
But I guess that my question now is that, the ARPA funds and the NFL funds are a one-time, one-shot thing. And my question is, would it be productive to infuse a certain amount of that money that would help bring down the buildings that need to come down, sustain the ones that should be sustained? And then, like you said, Mr. Hoffman, is to, bring those back on the tax rolls, sell them, and get them moving, so that we have a sustainable, renewable housing stock for people, and affordable housing also. So I would be willing to maybe propose that we take some of these ARPA funds or the NFL funds to infuse that. Now the sustainability and the employment portion, that's another issue. How do we get past that? But again, like Mr. Hoffman said, it takes money to make money. So this might be our opportunity to infuse some money in here and begin building that money from the sale and the rehabilitation of these buildings to begin hiring, and while we go by with the skeleton crew and build that up. Does that sound like something that could be, that you would be amenable to, the group would be amenable to?
if I can try to jump in, because you asked like, what is our ask? And I hope this answers that same question too, which is, is that everything we're putting forward here, we've pieced together as all very necessary pieces of this really complicated
Right.
puzzle, right? We have to do property maintenance. We have to do demo. We have to do stabilization. We need legal interventions. We need staff. These are all pieces that we think are vital and that they all have to happen together. And so while you, as members of the Board of Aldermen, are putting together these recommendations for funding from ARFA, from NFL, we ask that you continue to refer back to this and think, are we covering all of these bases? Have we considered the staffing to do this well? Is there technology to support that staff in making good decisions? And are we really going to move the needle on this decades-long issue? Or are we going to continue to tread water with the amount of funding we're putting forward? So our ask is just to keep considering that this is a massive, complicated issue that needs big money and needs to cover a lot of different bases to really make an impact. And I know that might seem vague, but I think if Peter and Tori agree, that's really the ask.
I don't think it's vague, I mean, at the same time, we have some of the staff available. We don't have all of the staff, but I think as long as we have some, we can move forward and maybe, look at some legislation and see if we can't get something going here, or at least a resolution to move forward with the proposal that you have presented here. And I will share this with the rest of our colleagues also. At this time, I see Alderman Page from the 5th Ward is on, and I'd like to recognize him. And I know you came in late, and I just wanted to know, do you have any questions? And I know you're probably very familiar with the Vacancy Collaborative. So
Yes, I am, as well as very active in demolishing properties that cannot be rehabbed in the fabulous 5th Ward. I don't have any questions at this time. I'm just listening carefully to gain knowledge here.
Okay, all right. We're just about winding it up now, unless someone else has something to add. I appreciate your attendance today, and the presentation was very informational. Do you entertain opportunities to present to neighborhood groups? I bet you do. I mean, either as a threesome or as a onesome. I know Peter's been to our neighborhood at some meetings, and I don't know if, go ahead, Tori.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, absolutely. We do that fairly regularly as time and staffing allows, but we are happy to coordinate with you or anyone else on the Board of Aldermen to come into your neighborhoods and talk about not only what we do and what the need is, but what resources and tools we will provide, how you can get involved, be a part of our working groups, so on and so forth. So we'd be happy to do that.
Okay, well, thank you so much. At this time, I will, if there's no announcements, any announcements from the committee members? I did see a few other aldermen on the call. Is there anybody on the call that's not part of the committee that has anything to add? Okay. No announcements. Excused members. I believe everybody was here. Is that correct, Ms. Clark?
Correct.
Okay. I will take a motion to adjourn, and thank you again, Vacancy Collaborative, for coming here to present to us. It's been very meaningful, and I think throughout the city, everybody could use this knowledge. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Motion
you.
to adjourn.
Thank you.
Second.
Second?
Second.
Previous roll? Hearing no objection to previous roll, this meeting is adjourned, and thank you very much, everybody that's attended.
Thank you. Thank
All
you.
right.